Hey guys, wanted to just briefly hop on before I let this podcast roll. I wanted to tell you what series is going to be all about. I'm going to be interviewing, hopefully, a fan or media member or both of every NBA franchise and team just to see what their experiences have been like rooting for that team. And it's leading up to a bigger project in the summer that I'm going to release probably or fall, depending on how long it takes me to put all this together. They're all going to be, you know, the goal is roughly 30 minutes or so. Some will run longer. This one ran a little longer. If I have a good conversation going, I'm not going to stop it at 30 minutes. And some might run a little shorter. But overall, this is going to be about getting fan experiences, talking to them, seeing what their team rooting for that has been like, what covering it has been like, and I'll have some more hardcore fans, some more casual fans, some media members. And this one is the first episode. Started with Samson Folk. He's a great writer for Raptors Republic. I'm recording this after the podcast. He doesn't really plug much of his stuff, but he's fantastic. You guys should look at what he does. Anyways, enjoy the rest of the podcast. Bye.
Hi guys, welcome to a new series I'm launching. I will not tell you entirely what this is for, at least in this section. I'll probably film something beforehand, but I'm going to be interviewing some people that cover or are fans of all NBA teams. And today we're starting with the men in the North, the North Stars of the NBA. We're starting with one of the most accomplished journalists, in my opinion, from that sphere. Samson Folk, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Excited to be having, I think, a unique and insightful type of conversation with you. So I liked your idea, and from hearing about it, I like your plans to execute it. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I hope it's good. So first things first, you want to tell the audience just a bit about your work and like where they can find you and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's not super important. My name's Samson Folk. If you Google me, something should come up, and you can direct yourself to my work from there, probably. If
Okay,
not, just enjoy Asher's work in the meantime, please and thank you.
yeah. So Samson has been covering the Raptors for a decent amount of time now, right?
Yep.
Um, and I believe you like rooted for them before you started covering them too.
Yeah, grew up in
Okay,
Canada, so they were
yeah,
the natural outlet for fandom of basketball. Like
yeah,
some people go counterculture, which is totally, you can be, I don't know, technically Minnesota was geographically the closest team to me, I think, growing up.
yeah,
But I always did like the Raptors, and I don't know
yeah.
if it was being early on, kind of like, I don't know, you have like nationalism pilled as a kid. You watch like the Olympics growing up, and they also have like the maple leaf on the Raptors jerseys. I was like, those are my
Yeah,
guys. So, and DeMar DeRozan was awesome. He was like my favorite player, probably my favorite player
yeah,
ever. So yeah,
yeah. When you were first getting in, how did you first start watching basketball? Like, what was the in for you?
honestly, just there was in Canada every once in a while before my family bought like the sports package. Where
Yeah,
you could watch all the games on the big Canadian TV channels. There was
yeah,
like the main channel's CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Channel, and they would have on Sundays, they would play a lot of the Raptors matinee games. So on Sundays,
hmm,
in kind of those middle hours of the day, you get to watch like a Raptors game or something. And that was my first, I don't know, introduction to it. I wasn't like a lot of kids in that I saw Vince Carter at the dunk contest and I was like,
yeah,
whoa, I didn't actually watch that live. I have no connective tissue to that moment or anything besides, I
yeah,
guess, YouTubing it later. But yeah, just watching like Sunday games and then eventually, you know, liking the team and my family eventually like buying a sports package and then watching more games later on.
yeah. What what did that like first few years for you look like? Because I know for like different people, it can look a lot of different ways. Like if you come in during a good time, you can be like, "Ah, yeah, hell yeah," and then your team kind of blows out, and you're like, what am I supposed to do now? But the Raptors have gone through a decent amount of like turnover. So depending on where you got in, those first few years might have looked, some different.
Yeah, I think for the most part, my fandom was, I don't know, like not fledgling, but I would watch as much as
Yeah.
I could being a kid when you go to school. And then also just like extracurriculars. I played a lot of sports myself growing up. So a lot of my nights like were just doing my own stuff. So I didn't watch that
Yeah.
much, but kind of like checking in on and watching the Calderon Raptors when I could. And then by the
Hmm.
time DeMar DeRozan was a rookie and Chris Bosh was kind of like on his way out, that's when I really started to prioritize watching basketball. And that wasn't limited to just the Raptors. That was also kind of informed by like LeBron had just set the NBA on fire. I know Zach Lowe has
Yeah.
discussed that the decision was kind of like a watershed moment for ESPN investing into their basketball coverage too. And I think my
Yeah.
fandom of the league at large also kind of aligned with that. So I started watching the DeMar DeRozan Raptors a bunch. And when you come in at that point, you have to get used to losing, and you have to look for like
Yeah.
development and progression, and you have to also be interested in Valanciunas and Terrence Ross, and you're like they have this interesting point guard from Houston who's named Kyle Lowry. So it was kind of
Yeah.
like that to begin with.
Yeah. When you're rooting for a rookie like DeMar, what are the expectation? What were the expectations around that time? Because he was like a mid to late lottery pick, if memory serves for
Yep,
me.
ninth.
So like, yeah. So that he's going to be good, or at least you hope so. But those first few years, what was the like year to year improvement like, and how did that make you like? Did that increase your enthusiasm for the team, or it sort of just stay you know,
So
invested.
yeah, I think the enthusiasm did increase because I was starting to
Yeah.
play more basketball in my own life.
Mm,
My watching of the Raptors also kind of correlated with playing like club and travel basketball, learning more
yeah.
about the game as I played it, and then being able to see those things acted out by like the professionals at a way higher level, of course.
Yeah.
And the expectations for DeMar were initially, I was like, this guy is sick and dunks the hell out of the basketball. And that was mostly it. And then I think the Raptors played the Nets when they were the New Jersey Nets in
Yeah.
England. And DeMar
Mm,
and Brook Lopez were the two highest scoring players from those games. Bargnani was still on the Raptors. But DeMar hit a bunch of those like tight little pin downs or curls around the free throw line, which was
yeah.
somewhat a new development for him to be making like 16-foot jump shots. I remember that game was incredible. Brook Lopez still has the scar from
Yeah.
Andrea Bargnani's nail cutting him on his right delt or whatever it is. And
Yeah.
I think DeMar became like the leading scorer overseas for an NBA player or something like that, which I clung on to at the time. And so he and then the next year the Raptors they were really bad, but so much of the offense went to DeMar, which meant that his numbers went up, but there wasn't that much improvement. And he had this
Yeah.
huge dump that gave you like this false sense of like, oh, he's gonna score like 8 points per game more every single season. And then he
Yeah.
kind of like he plateaued a little bit during year three and that kind of stuff. But basically watching DeMar from the early point on is just watching a guy slowly collect skills and oddly goes against the grain of like progression isn't linear. For DeMar, it kind of
Hmm.
was. He just always
Yeah.
kept building, 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 building. So that's what that was as far as like informing learning as a fan, I think.
Yeah. And during those times, like for the Nuggets specifically, because that's who I've rooted for,
But
uh, like you have those cult hero sort of guys during
big
those
time.
seasons, because like I cling on to Gary Harris like no other
Yeah.
role player, because I mean the trade that we sent him out with for Aaron Gordon is largely like what started the Nuggets contending window, but like he was on the team the first few years of Jokic's career, and the chemistry between those two is kind of what got me into Nuggets like hardcore. Is there anyone for the Raptors that was like the cult hero of those years?
It it probably is overall DeMar. He is
Yeah.
the face of like you were almost there, and then there was a very quick change in the name of Kawhi Leonard, and they came around.
Yeah.
And Kyle and DeMar, I don't know how much Gary Harris was maligned. I remember listening to when I was actually doing a road trip to Chicago and Toronto, Gary Harris
Hmm.
on Zach Lowe's podcast as I was driving,
Yeah.
and I thought he was so awesome. And the way he talked about improving as a 3-point shooter was great. I'm a big fan of Gary Harris over here.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he was maligned for failures in Denver, but I know that
Yeah.
DeMar and Kyle definitely were. There were portions of each year, each season, eras where, the team or fans were like, trade these guys because we
Yeah.
need to change things up. I think the big names in Toronto were the cult heroes to some degree, honestly. And maybe that's a
Yeah.
bit of revisionist history, but I think that's probably the way it shook out. Otherwise, you're looking at like these fledgling attempts to debate, Terrence Ross having a higher ceiling than DeMar, or
Yeah.
James Johnson needs to be the starting, small forward, or all this other kind of stuff. But I think
Yeah.
it mostly still revolves around Kyle and DeMar.
Yeah. And speaking of that quick change, what was the like feeling around it when, you get swept by Cleveland? I think
Yeah.
that was a sweep, right?
Hmm.
You get knocked out for like the third year in a row by the same team. You guys probably feel like you need a change, and then at the cost of this dude who you've rooted for like 7 years at this point, gets shipped out, and then you get Kawhi. What's the like feeling there? Is that bittersweet? Is that all sweet?
After it had happened, I really wondered during the I guess the off season. I was like, I don't know what they're gonna do because that was a huge
Yeah,
disappointment. Obviously, the Raptors.
yeah,
It wasn't so much that the Raptors had improved so much; they had improved. It was the fact that LeBron looked beatable within the
yeah,
hierarchy of the Eastern Conference. Like, hey, this might be something you can do, and then all of a sudden it wasn't, and they lost worse than ever. So to see that was really
yeah,
disappointing. And I was driving, it was like, I don't know, 6 a.m. I was driving to a location because I was doing landscaping work. And then the
yeah,
tweet came through, and I was like, they got Kawhi, first of all, nuts.
yeah,
And then I was like, okay, it's DeMar. And I was just shocked that Pascal and OG weren't involved. I was shocked about
yeah,
the trade. But then immediately
yeah,
what comes afterwards is Chris Haynes is like, he's not going to be there. He's not going to report. And I was like, well, damn, this is a bit of a downer. And then everything
yeah,
else was just kind of like sitting on your hands as a Raptors fan saying,
yeah,
we might be really great, but also he might not show up. And then he did. And,
yeah,
the offense kind of split into two. Like there was like Kawhi and Danny offense, and then there was Kyle plus the rest of everybody offense. And they were just a
yeah,
tremendous team. So it worked out well.
yeah, yeah. During that year, what was it kind of like having that split, the Kawhi and Danny, and then kind of the rest of the guys who had been there for a while, of like, did it feel kind of like two separate things like you were talking about on the offense? Just did it feel like two separate cultures at the same time?
Yeah, totally. That was one of the first big pieces I ever wrote for Raptors Republic. It was called Kawhi Leonard's Sticky Hands. And that
Yeah,
not like in a pejorative type of sense. It was like good he
yeah,
was holding on to the ball because as we all well
yeah,
know for years, he's an incredible scorer and can do so
yeah,
without requiring anybody to give him an advantage. But it was really cool to see him kind of I don't know, demarcate everything. Like create just
yeah,
this separate space for himself to succeed. And also Kyle Lowry to that point, I think still he is now probably properly rated as one of the best like
yeah,
table setters. And there was a couple years after that Raptors championship team where people said like, "Whoa, this type of playmaker is incredible." But to that
yeah,
point, people didn't understand that Kyle Lowry was kind of like the curator of everything happening offensively. Nick
right,
Nurse, Kyle Lowry merchant to some degree. Um, we saw him organizing offense beautifully and able to do it with guys like checking in and out. And it didn't really matter that he had to do it without Kawhi being involved in a lot of their pet actions. He was just able to shrink the floor
yeah,
and make it work in these smaller spaces. So that was a really cool thing to see Kyle succeed in that context as a genius playmaker and then kind of feed everybody around. And then to see Kawhi do it as like this lone wolf was a cool juxtaposition, I think.
yeah. What was it like, kind of having to once you guys won the chip? Did it feel like Kawhi might come back, or did you kind of resign yourself to, all right, this was probably a one-off. It was fun while it lasted. Let's rinse our hands.
I figured he was gone. You know,
Yeah,
that was actually my first time on national television was when Kawhi left. I got tapped for
yeah,
an interview, and I was just kind of like, I think we all saw this coming. I know at the
right.
parade, Uncle Dennis, I think he started chanting 5 more years or something. He was having
Yeah,
fun. He was doing his thing, but it
yeah,
seemed like Kawhi was going like that. He had done
right.
his job. He had met the requirements of his contract, and obviously a
Yeah,
guy who is very mercurial to fans. But one thing is understood is that he likes to be where he likes to be. He's very driven by his
yeah,
own interest, and not in
yeah,
a bad way, just in like a self-determining way. And so
yeah,
he determined that he was going south, and
yeah,
God bless him. Could have had a chip or two if injury luck hadn't broken the wrong way. Yeah,
yeah. When
tough.
before he left, he did win the chip, obviously. What was that like, just experiencing the first like real success, not only getting to the finals for the first time in franchise history, but winning
Yeah,
it as well? Be it with some, KD got hurt, Clay got hurt, but
sure.
at the same time, you feel probably great because you won a chip.
Yeah, nobody over here. I don't know about I well, firstly, I don't like to invalidate any championships or like rank them necessarily
Yeah,
because there is a physical toll that all players pay into on
for
the route
sure.
there. And to like invalidate that process seems regressive for like fans and players and
Yeah,
everybody. It does the sport no good, I don't think. But that being
yeah,
said, like everybody sees Katie's injury and says, that definitely greases the wheels for Raptors championship, of
right.
course. Um, but nobody really like people were, I don't know, there was some people in the crowd cheered when he got injured.
Yeah,
Obviously, that was covered. And then he got a huge
yeah,
ovation when he was like walking off, which I think was,
right.
people trying to make amends for whoever was
Yeah,
cheering when he got injured. And then that game they lost. There was a day or two. Then you go back to Golden
yeah,
State and they win it there. The injury is not anybody's front of mind. I didn't even know what to
right.
think, to be quite honest, because the Raptors were they just were never there. And usually a team
You're
kind
right.
of gets there or gets close to there before they win
Yeah,
it. And the Raptors just kind of like made that leap and won it, which was crazy.
yeah,
But like we see it with the Celtics now, right? Like they've been hanging around it for so long. We'll see if they finally
right.
get it. But yeah, disbelief to some degree. But after the
Yeah,
Raptors, they won like the two in Golden State. Kawhi's like, fuck it, let's get both. You were
yeah,
like, damn, this team, they have the cojones, they can make it happen. So
yeah,
Kawhi Leonard almost single handedly ushered in a sense of self belief to the city of Toronto, perhaps that had
yeah,
been taken and smushed by LeBron over like a 5 year stretch.
yeah. And I mean, you you can't really control injury. You beat who's in front of you, and you guys
Yeah,
did that. Because like the Nuggets were hurt for multiple seasons. The Suns went through four injured teams, but
the
they
Nuggets could have been
still,
there, man.
people are still like they made
Like,
it to the finals.
yeah,
Oh, they could have. Yeah, no, I could have a whole 20-minute thing on how if Jamal Murray
yeah.
didn't get hurt, they are probably on a
Oh
three-peat
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
But um, like injuries happen. It's part of the game. It's unfortunate when it
Hmm.
happens, but like you can't control those things. So it's very much you beat who's in front of you, and if you win, you win. And the Raptors won. And once Kawhi leaves, what is the like? Do you feel how do you feel going into the next season? What do you want the plan to be? Because you still have Siakam, you still have Gasol, Ibaka, all those guys that were there,
Yeah,
just minus the guy who really got you there.
yeah. I expected them to be a very good team,
Yeah.
mostly because I think that there was a very natural transition from Kawhi to OG, and
Hmm.
obviously OG the shot creation stuff plateaued, and people saw it as he tried to like take it further.
Yeah.
He did receive like Kawhi Leonard comps, but that's just hopeful fandoms, obviously.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, he had appendicitis during the championship run and didn't get to play at all,
Mm,
really. He
okay.
stepped in during year three for him and obviously just had
Yeah.
like a monstrous season in 2019
Hmm.
20. Kyle Lowry was brilliant. Pascal took, an all NBA leap. OG Anunoby was
Yeah.
great. We were looking at Norman Powell, Serge Ibaka, Marc Gasol. Fred
Yeah.
VanVleet. There's just like they signed Rondé Hollis Jefferson, and he has an awesome year. Everything still clicked, and I think there was an expectation by a lot of
Yeah.
people that we're going to see this huge drop off, and the huge drop off
Hmm.
came in the playoff pressure cooker. But as far as like regular season hoops, my
Yeah.
expectation was they were probably still going to be like around a top 4 team. I didn't expect them
Hmm.
to be 2, but
Yeah.
that's how it shook out, which was
Yeah.
really fun season to cover and watch for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. And what do you like when you look back on those seasons, the ones right after Kawhi, right before Kawhi, what seasons like meant more to you as a fan and why? Or does it not really have there's no comparing the two?
Well, the first time I started coverage was in the championship season, which
Yeah.
was really cool. And there's no way for any other season besides the championship season to be the coolest one, I don't think.
Right.
The type
Yeah.
of basketball that was played, I do think even with KD hurt, I think it's easy to look at that Raptors team and kind of
Yeah.
rate them as one of the best defenses we've seen, if not in the past
Oh, for sure.
decade of the 20th century, right? They really incredible basketball was played by them. And
Yeah.
you know, that's a really cool thing to watch. It's a really cool thing from like a narrative perspective to watch them piece it together over time, adding Kawhi at the start and then also adding Gasol at the trade deadline. There's so many
Yeah.
different moving like parts, and there's a lot of success attached to it. That's definitely the coolest. 2015-16, 2019-20 are probably the most enjoyable outside of that.
Sure.
2015-16 was like the Raptors making this crazy run to the Eastern Conference
Yeah.
Finals against the Pacers and then the Heat. And they do take 2 off of the Cavs, but there was, some semblance of like they're not that close. They're like game
Yeah.
6, but it's like game 5.5 to some degree, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was an awesome season because it was like the full culmination of DeMar and Kyle kind of announcing their place as, top tier Eastern Conference players. And also on
Yeah.
top of that, you could expect progression from there. It didn't come in the
Right.
way that people expected, but that was the
Yeah.
expectation. That was a really cool season. And 2019-20 was just a bunch of guys all making that step. And so one of the coolest
Right.
things to cover is progression in basketball.
Yeah.
You like the Denver Nuggets a lot. You get to
Yeah.
be in this
Yeah.
unique place where, similar to Raptors fans, especially with like Fred and Pascal and OG and like Norman
Yeah.
Powell, these guys who are at the back end of the draft or undrafted free agents, you're like,
Yeah.
my team is so good at basketball. And there's these new guys who are great too. And
Yeah.
the Nuggets are walking that line, and the Raptors did too. So 2019-20 is very cool for that reason, except
Yeah.
no Jokic. And Jokic is
Yeah.
pretty good watch, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. I mean, the 15-16 Raptor season is fun to me too because the Nuggets weren't any good around that time.
Sure.
We had Moutier as the
You
franchise
guys
guy
signed
around that time.
Millsap that year, yeah?
No, Millsap was 17-18.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 17-18 was the first year with Millsap, and they won, I think, 47 games or something like that. Got knocked out of the playoffs in Game 82
Oh,
against the Timberwolves, and then the next season was the year where we were the 2 seed, beat the Spurs, and then lost to the Blazers. Um, but 15-16 was Jokic's rookie year. It was Moutier's rookie year, I believe. There was some stuff to be happy about, but once the playoffs rolled around, I was like, I don't have anyone to root for. Who's like the team I'm going to root for? And I chose the Raptors. So that was a
mhm.
fun playoff run. Not as a hardcore Raptors fan or anything, but they were my second team around
Did
that
you
time. So
did you have a favorite player from the Raptors at that point in time?
it was DeMar, but also Terrence Ross. I had a soft
Yeah.
spot for Terrence Ross around that time. He
Terrence
was
is kind of
just
like a Nuggets type player, honestly. He could
yeah,
have fit on that
honestly,
team at any time.
yeah. I'm surprised he never played for them. But like looking back on the early years, my favorite players were like Nuggets Jr., Terrence Ross, DeMar. Like very like I can look back and be like, I liked athletic wings a
Yeah,
lot.
big time.
Gary Harris was one of my favorite Nuggets players around the time. Um, so it's funny seeing that transition of like young me being like athletic wings go burr to now
Mm-hmm.
nowadays it's like all post footwork is what I love. Like Jalen
Yeah.
Brunson, love watching Jalen Brunson because his footwork is second to none
He can
almost.
he can
Like,
hang a pivot like crazy.
oh yeah, it's crazy to see. Like Jamal Murray too. Like the guard post footwork is what really gets me going nowadays. And also like Embiid and Jokic, obviously, you know. Um, but yeah, so like it's fun looking back on like the first few years of a fandom, at least for me, because it's like they got to the chip eventually, but the ride up to the chip is also really fun, you know. And the Nuggets didn't ever really have the DeMar trade, you know, because we had the guy, we drafted the guy already.
Yeah.
Uh,
Not
but
just like the guy
like
italics,
the
like
guy,
might
yeah,
be top 10
bold.
all time by the time he hangs it up, right?
Yeah, like if he wins another MVP and a ring this year, I think you could start making top 15 arguments, if not top 10. Um, but that also might be me jumping the gun just a slight bit. But nowadays the Raptors, you kind of like fully transitioned into a new era. You know,
Hmm.
you trade Pascal this year after like years of rumors. You trade OG after years of rumors. What were those trades like for you at the deadline? Like, what was the feeling around, you know, you finally trade these guys who had been in the rumor mill for years and years and years? Like, I remember my first year as a Nuggets beat reporter, people were like, oh, yeah, OG's going to be traded for 3 first round picks. And it never happened. You know, you have Masai always shopping these guys for astronomical prices, and then you end up trading them for, you know, what you traded them for. What was the feeling around those trades?
So the OG one I liked as far as like
Right.
value, let's say, because last year the Knicks offered 3 first round picks with protections, and it's like a
Right.
hodgepodge, right, from other teams, and they
Yeah.
offer that plus Evan Fournier, and the Raptors ultimately said no to that. There
Sure.
was, I don't know, based on what I've heard, as far as like the Pascal stuff, there was talks about Nemhard, Healed, and two
Hmm.
first round picks, which I think
Yeah.
is a better package than what they
Yeah.
got. Bruce Brown and I guess 3 firsts and Wara, and the firsts are they're back end, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
As far as that goes, I do think that the OG trade provided people with like a okay, we're transitioning, but this
Yeah.
might be taking like a step forward, but it's kind of like it's a Euro step maybe because it doesn't include
Yeah.
OG, and that was like the calcification, the crystallization of OG won't be signing here. And then as far as like that keeps going with OG
Yeah.
not signing there, then you're like, okay, he was going out the door anyway. Emmanuel Quickly, RJ Barrett. This is like an interesting package of guys.
Yeah.
Let's go from here. I was pretty sad to see Precious go and OG go. Those were two of my favorite guys to interview, to be quite honest.
Right.
But c'est la vie. And the Pascal
Yeah.
trade, I think when it happened, I was like, damn, I don't think they got as much as maybe they could have earlier on. And that's tough. But
Yeah.
it was, again, like you're looking at, okay, we know what the team's plan is. We all went and
Right.
talked to like Masai about, what the future might be. He did a long press
Hmm.
conference, and that's kind of where we stand now. And then, but there's a little bit less momentum for all that kind of stuff now because it's not like
Yeah.
Scotty Barnes putting up like 28, 10, and 7
Yeah.
through the end of the season. He broke his
Yeah.
hand. And so we're
Yeah.
watching a lot of like G League minutes and stuff like that. And some interesting Emmanuel Quickly driving process,
Yeah.
which and Grady Dick stuff. That's the
Right.
saving grace of the end of this season, I think. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Rookies are always fun, and Grady has
yeah,
really come on. Like I haven't watched too much Raptors this year. I won't lie, but
sure.
like
Not a
as
great
I've
watch.
tuned in, yeah, as I've tuned in over the year, it went from Grady Dick being in the G League because he kind of sucked at the first, you know, start of the season, and now
Big time.
he's having some genuine like flashes of, oh, this is what I saw at Kansas. You know, like this is what we were expecting from
Hmm.
Grady coming in.
Yeah, big time. I think so much of what Grady does is as an off ball player is shaping to
Yeah.
the ball, is being able to add value in that way. And a lot of that is built out of him having respect as a 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
And he started out so poorly as a 3-point shooter that teams started to not respect the motion as much. And basically,
Right.
he was still making all the right reads as a cutter. He was still doing all the right stuff. All
Yeah.
that off-ball stuff was still there. It just needed to be multiplied by being a good shooter. And so in
Yeah.
2024, he's the best rookie shooter. Now, does it
Right.
make sense to delineate 2024 in the middle of a season that has 2 months prior to it? 3 months even? Not really, but I think he's at like 37% currently right now on good volume.
Yeah.
He makes a lot of cuts to the rim. He finishes a lot of shots at the rim right now. He's meeting the requirement of being like a guy who provides rim pressure with cuts. And the Raptors
Yeah.
definitely, by playing through their big men in a lot of delay action and a lot of like pick and roll, seal, swing, cut type of
Right.
actions so that they can build rim pressure out of that. He's finding his way to points without
Yeah.
requiring so much of the ball. And we're even seeing some like interesting pick and roll stuff too. So he just needed to
Yeah.
hit shots. He didn't even hit shots at the G League level, which was kind of
Right.
like, But then he
Is
started
this the
hitting them
next
at the
Johnny
NBA
Davis?
level. Yeah. I had looked at another
Yeah.
wizard actually, Kispert. Kispert, I think,
Yeah.
for the first chunk of his
Oh
career,
yeah.
shot like 23 or 24% from downtown. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is some precedent. I didn't care really because I'm
Right.
a Grady believer through and through. Pre-draft
Sure.
process, I was like, I'd love this guy on the Raptors.
Yeah.
But to quell fans' worries, I was like, look, Corey Kispert, the handsome shooter from Washington, he actually was really, really bad for a long time,
Yeah.
and it came around. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of where I was
And
at.
like you guys are watching a team now where you have a lot of exciting young players. You have Scotty Barnes, who is like one of the most exciting young players in the league. You know, he has a lot of upside and he's already really good. And it's not getting talked about a ton. Not many young players are getting talked about a ton because of Vic. Like Wemby is
Yeah.
all anyone talks about as far as like rookies go, and maybe if they're lucky, Chet. But like Paolo Banchero, not really talked about. Won Rookie of the Year last year, you know. So like you guys are kind of stealth cruising right now. But sneaky, I think you guys have a pretty solid young core. Like there's a lot to be excited about with these young players. What's the feeling generally speaking about like this young core? Do you think that a lot of these players are going to stick around, or do you think it's more of a we're going to find a piece or two from this team and then we're going to build more in the future? You know, are
I
these more
think,
Terrence Rosses or are these more, you
yeah,
know, the Kyle Lowrys?
yeah, good question. I think that they're still aggressively in like talent acquisition stage through
Yeah,
whatever means possible. If it comes via trade, it comes via trade. If it comes via the draft, it comes via the draft. And they aren't sold on doing either route. They'll just take
right.
whatever, if there's value, talent, they will trade a draft pick to get it. If
Yeah,
they perceive a guy in the draft to be like, wow, that guy, we need that guy, they'll trade up to get it. Like, and
yeah,
if someone is available for whatever reason, if they feel like Malik Monk wants to come north of the border, that might happen, right? Like all this kind of
yeah,
stuff, they'd say yes because they just want
right.
talent, bringing in talent, talent,
Yeah,
talent, talent. And as far as like the quality of the core, I think there's a big separation between what people think of RJ Barrett. He's always been a polarizing player, but I think a
yeah,
lot of people don't view him, a lot of people view him as like a guy who's building value now who won't be a
right.
part of like the best Scotty team in the future. And
Sure.
whether or not that's fair, I think that
Hmm.
that is how a large percentage of people view him. And there's another
Okay.
percentage that star J, like they're like,
Yeah,
he might still get there.
right.
I think I'm in the middle. I believe in
Okay.
RJ's ability to improve and find a way to fit next to Scotty. And especially, I think his rim pressure is important. I think there's
Yeah,
questions about like how they fit together defensively, but I hope they get a shot to try it out. I mean, they're both going to be under
yeah,
contract for like the foreseeable future. Emmanuel
yeah,
quickly was brought in, and Masai said as much after they made the trade. He gets on the phone,
yeah.
he's being videoed. He's like, I love the fit with Scotty. And that
Right.
actually this season has gone poorly. I know he's
Hmm.
injured now, but like The
Yeah.
two-man actions between IQ and Scotty haven't worked well. It isn't the Murray Jokic connection out of like these post-hub situations
Yeah.
that maybe, because to be quite honest with you, I think a lot of people, when they see like Quickly and Scotty, they see the skill sets they have. Although they are different than Jokic and Murray, you can
Yeah.
see that they could be facsimiles. And you hope that the
Yeah.
two-man actions could be facsimiles of what happens in Denver, which is ungodly, pure hoops.
Yeah.
Um, that hasn't happened yet, and we don't get to see that towards the end of the season. But I think people understand that, like, okay, Quickly is a part of the front or the backcourt going forward. He's going to sign a
Right.
contract with the Raptors. He's there, but still, I would say that Quickly probably, if the Raptors are winning a championship, there's every chance that he's a Terrence Ross or a Jonas Valanciunas instead of a Kyle Lowry, let's say.
Yeah.
Scotty, I think, is the only like mainstay. And
Right.
Grady also, I think it would be very tough to pry him away from the Raptors,
Sure.
to be
Right.
honest with you. But I think like
Yeah.
everyone else on the team, gettable, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they're entering an interesting part where like they're gonna find out if RJ Barrett is, someone they keep going forward, or is the Monte Ellis to Scotty Barnes, Steph Curry.
Sure.
Because like they do have a weird fit together from what I've heard, from what I've seen. I think I watched like 2 games of them together or something like that. So not
Yep.
not a large sample size by any means, but from what I've heard from Raptors people that I listen to and trust, there is a bit of a weird fit there. Um,
What
but
did you think when you were watching?
I
Like
I
what
think
popped out?
the spacing. I don't know
Sure.
if there's enough spacing between the two of them. Because in today's league, like what makes the Jokic Murray 2-man game work so well is the fact that like Aaron Gordon's like he's not a 3-point shooter, but his gravity along the baseline, like teams
He's
cannot
just
lose
he's
track of
just the
where Aaron
best
Gordon is
baseline cutter of all time. Yeah. Who can finish everything at the rim? What the hell?
ever. Yeah, no, like yeah, like you throw anything up around him and he's gonna finish it. Like he had a cockback tomahawk putback the other day. Like he's a crazy athlete still. Like it's insane. But then you also have KCP and MPJ, who are two of the best shooters in the NBA.
Mhm.
And then also Jamal and Jokic are also two of the respective better shooters in the NBA. Jamal from three, Jokic from mid. So like you can't leave anybody there. Whereas RJ is a bit of a shaky shooter from three. You could probably help off of him. Scotty, I know shot well at the start of the season, but I think that kind of
Yeah,
like
he
his
he he
percentages
ended
fell
up
off.
around 34% on the season.
Yeah. So like you feel kind of comfortable helping off Scotty a bit, and like I think the fit between them is weird because I view them as inside out scorers. And I think
Sure.
having two inside out scorers makes for a bit of an awkward fit if those are two of your main scorers. Because Murray, I think, is like a 3-level scorer. Jokic is definitely an inside out scorer. But like while Murray can finish at the rim, a lot of the stuff he does is, mid range pull ups, 3-point pull ups. He's doing a lot of footwork stuff in the mid or 3-point range to get open jump shots. And I think if you have multiple people trying to score at the rim at the same time, it allows people to kind of pack the paint.
Mhm.
So while one of them could figure out how to space the floor better, I think if they don't figure that out, I think that that's probably leaning to a Monte Ellis Steph Curry situation.
Yeah. That's insightful. There is using, using the Nuggets as like the North Star to aim for is obviously you can learn a lot from that. But also,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, like there's time and there's the possibility for development. It doesn't make it a
Yeah.
likelihood, but there's a possibility. And there is a long road between these Raptors and being anywhere close to emulating these Nuggets. Because good Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like there's a long road between anybody and the Nuggets, but that's the
Yeah.
team I use as an example because that's the team I know the best. Like
We
even
know the
if
hoops that we watch. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I watch every Nuggets game more or less. And, like if you're gonna aim to emulate somebody, the Nuggets are not about to shout.
Yeah.
um, but even then, like I feel like the Raptors are gonna find themselves in kind of an awkward middle ground for the next few years because Masai doesn't seem to want to rebuild like entirely. You know, he doesn't want to tear it down entirely from an outside looking in. Like he made the Jakob trade last season, made the Kelly Olynyk trade this season. Like he seems like he always wants to keep veterans around that can help them compete, and I think there's some value to that. But I also think that makes it harder to start hitting on the draft. You know, because not every draft class is going to be the 2023 draft class where it's a super deep class with a lot of talent, even in, you know, the late lottery, late teens, 20s. Like not every draft class is going to have be the 2022 draft class where you can get Peyton Watson as the 30th pick and Christian Brown as 21st. The 2024 class is not supposed to be good. Like outside of the top few, I don't know what sort of talent is going to be there. And I think if the more they kind of stray to this middle ground, the harder it'll be for them to get back to the top. Because I think you kind of have to, you don't have to bottom out per se, but I think you have to get lucky with the lottery if you're going to go through the draft. Or you have to get lucky with a disgruntled superstar like Kawhi.
Sure. I think that the Raptors, they will have at the very least 2 first-round picks in this upcoming draft. Probably
Yeah.
with the Pacers, I guess you're looking at between, I guess, like 16 probably and 21,
Right.
depending on how the rest of the season shakes out.
Yeah.
And they'll have OKC's pick, presumably, which is obviously the very back end.
Later.
Depending on how it
Yeah.
shakes out, they could have a top 6 pick, or they could have nothing at the top end of the draft. But
Right.
yeah, the Kelly Olynyk trade, I think, is to facilitate Darko's style. And like even last night, even the game against the Nuggets, which you would have watched, you would have seen.
Yeah.
They played a ton through Kelly,
Yeah.
and that
He
meant
was
that they're able.
Yeah, he was whipping.
Yeah, he had a good game, and they do a lot of that through delay action and through high post actions,
Right.
and it helps facilitate in their mind the right style of play, Darko's
Sure.
style of play, and they paid, you know, a first round pick, like a late first round pick for that,
Yeah.
and that's what they want to do. So he can help facilitate good basketball for the players they deem as part of like the core currently, and
Yeah.
I think that's important. Now, Jakob Poeltl, I think they overpaid for at the time, but both Jakob and Kelly kind of solidify a front court for meaningful basketball. Not necessarily like you won't be contending or anything like that, but you can play a certain style. You can encourage development, you know, heading one way, and that's how they approach it. As far as like tearing it down to the studs or anything like that, they could have gone for more draft capital instead of IQ and RJ. But I think that the Raptors are betting on like NBA or latent NBA talent at the NBA level rather than the draft immediately. So I guess we'll see. I guess this summer will be really, really indicative of what they want to do overall, because they could tailspin further, or they could try and like, hey, is the 10th or 9th spot so bad next year? Should we be interesting? And I guess we'll see how it shakes out. I'm excited for it regardless.
Yeah. I think the Raptors are excited moving forward because, like, I personally love IQ. At least, like, the stuff he did in New York was really fun to me. He's been a little lackluster with the Raptors so far, but I mean, also they've been injured. You know, he hasn't had time to fully gel with them. Give him a full off season, and I think him and Scotty can have some really interesting chemistry. And I like IQ is someone I'm really excited for. RJ is someone who, while a lot of people seem to write him off, he's only 23. Like there is a lot of time for him left to develop. And also Scotty's one of the brighter stars in the league. You know, he had good averages this season. He has a lot of flashes of being a really good player moving forward, and I think that he's someone that you guys can build around. You know, I think he's at that level. So, you know, whatever they do this offseason will be, you know, like you said, indicative of where they go. And I think it'll be an interesting route either way.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like the Jokic thing, right? Of course, not 1-to-1, but the Nuggets got to build differently because Jokic was like really good, and then he was all-star good, and then he was all NBA good, and then he was MVP good, and that completely reshaped the way that the Nuggets tried to build. And Scotty looks like
Right.
he could conceivably be like, it's easy to see how he becomes an all NBA player.
Yeah.
There's work to be done to really reach that next upper echelon, which is like MVP level. How good Scotty is kind of sets the tone for how the Raptors build. They need to hit on the margins wherever they can, of course. But
Yeah.
if they want to be like that next level team, it's about the one guy on the roster right now, because it's hard to conceive of them getting a better prospect than Scotty through any means.
Yeah.
So he kind of
Yeah.
sets the tone and the ceiling, I suppose.
I think so too. Yeah. And like going back to the Nuggets, I mean, they built with not bottoming out, you know.
Mhm.
You don't have to necessarily bottom out to build. Because the highest pick I think they got was Jamal, and that wasn't even through their own pick. That was through the Carmelo trade, and they got him at pick 7. MPJ was pick 13. They had good drafts with like Gary Harris, Yusuf Nurkic draft. Like you don't necessarily have to bottom out. So I think
Just
if the
be an
Raptors find a
incredible
way to
team and always make the right decision, like the Denver Nuggets.
just always make the correct decision every single time, and maybe you'll get
Easy
somewhere.
peasy.
Simple.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that brings us up to my, we went through kind of your entire history as a Raptors fan. So, anything you want to
No, I'm good with leaving that there. I think we have the story that we were hoping to, the narrative line. I feel like it reached its final point.
Yeah.
We'll see where it goes from here, but not cataloged on this podcast.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. To the viewers at home, I'll leave Samson's Twitter in the description. That's where you can find most of his stuff, at least linked. So yeah, thank you for
Just
coming
leave
on.
the link to the Google search.
All right, I'll leave the Google URL in the description.
Thanks, Asher.
Thank you, Samson, for coming on. Yeah. See you guys.